Hi, I'm Nora. I'm 27 years old. And if someone had told me that my own mother and brother would be the ones to destroy my life, I would have laughed. But now I know better. Because the night it all started was my birthday. I didn't plan anything grand. No balloons, no expensive venues, no Instagram stories. Just soft jazz playing in the background, white lanterns glowing in the hall, and the scent of roasted garlic and fresh-cut flowers lingering through the air. I spent the whole afternoon setting it up. The same house my father, Thomas, built with his own hands before he died. The house he left for me. My home. The guest list was small. A few close friends, 2 neighbors, and of course, my mother Marcia and my older brother Derek. I knew inviting them was a risk. Marcia was never warm, and Derek carried an ego as heavy as the gold watch he always showed off. But I hoped, just once, we could be civil. Peaceful. I wanted to feel like family, even if it was just for one night. Guests began arriving around 6 p.m. Some brought gifts, others just warm hugs. I smiled through it all, trying to ignore the nervous flutter in my chest. Then, in walked Marcia, dressed in cream silk, heels clicking on the floor like a warning bell. She didn't say happy birthday.
She didn't hug me.
She just raised her wine glass like a queen entering a room she already owned and nodded in my direction. Derek followed her a few minutes later. He gave me a smirk and a pat on the shoulder, like I was a waiter he mildly tolerated. I bit my tongue. We sat down for dinner. The chandeliers sparkled above us. Plates clinked. People chatted and laughed. And for a moment, just a brief, warm second, it almost felt like the birthday I'd hoped for. But good things don't last long in a house full of hidden knives. Halfway through the meal, Marcia stood up. Her fork tapped her wine glass sharply. Everyone fell silent. My heart skipped. Something very serious has happened, she said smoothly, eyes locked on me. My diamond ring, the one gifted to me by my late husband, is missing. The room tensed. Someone's fork slipped onto their plate with a clink. I blinked.
What?
It was in my overnight bag. In the guest room, she continued. And the last person who was near that room was Nora.
People turned to me.
I stood up slowly. I didn't touch anything. I didn't even go near. Don't lie. Her voice cracked like glass. You've always been jealous. Always greedy. That ring is worth over $20,000, and you knew that. My hands shook. My mouth went dry. I looked at Derek, hoping for support. He stood up too. Just give it back, Nora. Make this easy. I didn't take it. I snapped, my voice trembling. Why would I? That's when it happened. Derek lunged forward. He grabbed a fistful of my hair, yanked my head back painfully, and punched me straight in the face. My head jerked sideways. I stumbled, tasting blood. Gasps echoed around the room. No one moved. And then he said calmly, I'm calling the police. I stood there dazed, my vision swimming from the punch. My scalp burned from where Derek had yanked my hair. My cheek throbbed with a fiery sting, and a warm line of blood traced the edge of my lip. My knees felt weak. I reached for the table to steady myself, but no one came to help. Not one person. Silence smothered the room like fog. The guests sat frozen, wide-eyed and unsure. A couple looked away. Some clutched their wine glasses like props in a stage play they didn't want to be part of. And my mother, she didn't look horrified or shocked. She looked satisfied. This is what you get for betraying your family, she said under her breath, but loud enough for me to hear. You've always been a burden. Now you've shown everyone your true colors. Derek was already on the phone with 911, acting like the calm, responsible one. Yes, we need police, he said. There's been a theft of family heirloom, estimated at over $20,000. I wanted to scream, to shout the truth, but my voice wouldn't come. My hands trembled as I wiped the blood from my lip. I looked at people I once called friends. Not one of them met my gaze. 15 minutes later, red and blue lights flashed through the windows. A squad car pulled into the driveway. 2 uniformed officers stepped inside. The lead officer's eyes went straight to Derek, who, like clockwork, began his performance. That's her, he said, pointing directly at me. She had access to the guest room. The ring was in my mother's bag. Now it's gone. Do you have proof she took it? The officer asked. We all saw her heading toward the guest room. Marcia cut in, her voice cool and polished. And my bag was untouched until she left. I opened my mouth, finally able to speak. That's not true. I never went near your room. I didn't even know the ring was here. But they didn't listen. The officer walked toward me. Without asking more questions, he turned me around and pulled my hands behind my back. Cold, hard cuffs closed around my wrists. I flinched, stunned. You have the right to remain silent, the officer began. I couldn't believe it. I was being arrested. On my birthday. In my own home. The neighbors gathered outside as the officers led me out the front door. The house I grew up in, the one my father built, now watched me leave in handcuffs, like I was some criminal. Derek stood on the porch, arms crossed, a smug twist on his lips. Marcia held her wine like a trophy. The cameras from police body-worn units were rolling. I could already hear the whispers. Did you hear? Nora? Arrested for stealing from her own mother? My throat ached from holding back the sob that tried to claw its way out. My name, my dignity, everything was crumbling in front of me. And yet, somewhere deep inside me, a small ember began to burn. Not anger.
Not yet.
But something close. This couldn't be the end. It wouldn't be. The police station smelled like metal and bleach. The kind of sterile, hollow place that made you feel smaller just by standing in it. They took my fingerprints, searched my bag, even had me take off my shoes. My hair was still tangled from where Derek had grabbed it. My cheek, swollen and discolored, pulsed with every heartbeat. I kept repeating the same thing. I didn't take the ring. I never even saw it. But no one cared. They weren't looking for the truth. They were looking for someone to blame. After hours of questioning and processing, the officers told me there wasn't enough evidence to hold me. You're free to go, one of them said with a shrug, like the damage hadn't already been done. Free to go? Go where? I stepped outside just before sunrise. The streets were quiet, painted in dull gray by the early light. I pulled my phone from my purse with trembling hands, praying for one message. One missed call. Something that said someone out there still believed in me. There was nothing, except a single text from Derek. The locks have been changed. Don't come back. I stared at those words, my stomach twisting. I was homeless now.
Accused.
Humiliated. And alone. My thoughts went dark. I wanted to scream. To collapse. But I couldn't afford to.
Not now.
Then one name flashed through my mind. Clara. My aunt. My dad's sister. The only person in my family who had ever treated me like I mattered. I scrolled down to her contact and hit call. She answered on the first ring. Nora? Her voice was sharp with worry. I couldn't hold back anymore. They said I stole it. Derek hit me. They called the police. They had me arrested. There was a pause. Then, you come here.
Right now.
You come straight to me. An hour later, I stood outside her little blue house on the edge of town. A row of sunflowers leaned toward the morning sun along her porch. The kettle was already whistling inside. Clara opened the door and wrapped her arms around me. I hadn't even stepped fully inside before I broke down in her embrace. Every wall I had tried to hold up shattered. I told her everything between sobs. How my mother accused me. How Derek attacked me.
How they called the police.
How I had nowhere to go. She didn't interrupt. She just held me, brushed my hair back like I was a child again, whispered, "It's okay. You're safe now. Let it out." I stayed in her guest room that night. I barely slept. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw flashing lights, heard Marcia's voice, felt Derek's hand. But by morning, something had shifted. The humiliation was still there. The pain. The fear. But under it, something else was starting to grow. Clara handed me tea and looked me dead in the eyes. They picked the wrong girl to try and bury. And for the first time since that awful night, I believed her. The next morning, I stood at Clara's kitchen window, cradling a mug of chamomile tea between my sore hands. Outside, her garden was waking up with the sun, herbs swaying gently in the breeze, birds hopping between flower pots. It should have felt peaceful, but inside me something burned. Not grief,
Not shame.
resolve. I couldn't let them win. Not after what they did. Not after everything they took. I turned to Clara, who was folding laundry in the living room. I want to report them, I said quietly. She looked up, surprised, but not disapproving. I want to go back to the police. I want someone to hear my side. Really hear it. Clara paused, then nodded. Then that's exactly what we'll do. 2 hours later, I walked into the Clearwater Springs Police Department, not as a victim, not as someone broken, but as someone who had had enough. The officer at the front desk didn't even look up at first. "Let things settle," he muttered. "This sounds like a family matter." My fingers gripped the edge of the counter. It's not just a family spat. It's fraud, assault, a false police report, and I have proof. That's when she walked by. Detective Olivia Brooks. She was tall, calm, and carried herself like someone who had seen too many lies to fall for another one. She heard the last part of what I said and stopped in her tracks. "What's her name?" she asked the desk officer. He gestured lazily toward me. Nora something." Olivia turned to me. "Come with me." She led me into a small, glass-walled office and closed the door behind her. She sat down, opened a notepad, and looked me square in the eye. "Start from the beginning. Don't skip anything."
So I did.
I told her everything from the moment my mother accused me to the police dragging me out of my home. I told her about the house my father, Thomas, had built and left to me in his will. About how Marcia and Derek had slowly started changing documents, taking over finances, making subtle manipulations that I'd ignored, chalking them up to grief or family tension. But it hadn't been grief. It had been strategy. It wasn't about the ring, I said. That was just the excuse. They wanted the house. My name. My life. Olivia didn't interrupt once. She just listened, her eyes narrowing as she scribbled notes. "Do you have anything to support what you're saying?" she finally asked. I paused, thinking. There used to be a small fireproof box in my closet, with my dad's original will. His notes. I don't know if they got to it or not, but I hid it well. Olivia nodded. "We'll start there. And if you're telling the truth, we'll dig until it's all out." As I stepped out of the station, Clara was waiting in the car. "How did it go?" she asked. I buckled in. "It's not over yet, but I finally feel like I'm not the only one fighting anymore." And for the first time since the arrest, I felt something I hadn't in days. Hope. A few days passed. Detective Olivia Brooks had kept her word. She assigned a small, dedicated team to investigate my family's property documents and estate transfers. I turned over everything I still had, scanned bank statements, copies of Dad's emails, even a photo I'd taken years ago of the original will. Clara, and I searched every box in her attic and every old folder I'd saved on USB drives. Bit by bit, we pieced together what they'd tried to erase. But what cracked everything wide open came from the unlikeliest of places. A baby monitor. I was sitting with Olivia in her office, sipping lukewarm coffee, when she pulled out a dusty, dented recording device. "Recognize this?" she asked. I squinted. That was in my room as a kid. I think it ended up in the guest room later. Used to work like an intercom. She nodded. Turns out it was still working. It recorded everything the night of your birthday. My stomach flipped. She pressed play. Crackly static, then voices. Derek's voice came through first, low, smug, unmistakably cruel. "She's too naive. She won't even see it coming. She's too proud to fight back." Then Marcia's voice, cold as ever. "We'll say she took the ring. Make her look greedy. After that, the house is yours by Monday." My hands tightened around the paper cup. Hearing their actual voices plotting to destroy me, turned my stomach. It wasn't paranoia. It wasn't family drama. It was betrayal.
Planned.
Cold. Criminal. Olivia looked at me. "We're filing a restraining order today. They can't sell, rent, or access that property until the case is resolved. My mind reeled, but Olivia's calm grounded me. She wasn't just working a case, she was fighting beside me. That night, Clara and I sat on the back porch. The sky above us rumbled softly with thunder, but the storm hadn't started yet. She handed me a mug of cocoa, her hands warm from the stove. "You okay, kiddo?" "No," I said truthfully, "but I'm getting there." The next week, Olivia introduced me to District Attorney Julia Miller, a no-nonsense woman in her 40s who wore power like perfume. She was sharp, direct, and had zero patience for injustice. After reviewing the baby monitor recording and our compiled financial documents, she spoke clearly and without hesitation. "We've got enough to charge both of them, Marcia and Derek, with multiple offenses: fraud, conspiracy to commit theft, emotional abuse, falsifying documents, assault, and filing a false police report." It didn't even feel real. "We'll move fast," Julia said. "I want them blocked from accessing any estate assets until the trial.
They don't get to profit from this.
Not $1. A few days later, Olivia called me back to the station. "We caught something," she said, sliding a paper across her desk. It was a bank transfer report. Over the last 8 months, Derek had been moving money, small amounts, from the estate account into an investment account under his name. Every transaction was labeled property maintenance, but the funds were going straight into personal stocks and crypto. "That's my inheritance," I said, stunned. "Dad left that money for house upkeep, taxes, not for Derek's trading addiction." Olivia nodded. "And now it's evidence." We had motive. We had method. And we had a motive backed by recorded proof. That night, I sat in Clara's kitchen, going through a stack of printed emails, bank slips, and handwritten letters from my father, things I used to cry over, but now I studied like a lawyer. Clara looked at me over her reading glasses. "You know what I think," she said, slicing vegetables for dinner. "They never expected you to fight back. You were always the quiet one, the peacemaker." I nodded slowly. "That made me easy to control. But not anymore." She smiled, soft and proud.
"No.
Not anymore." There was a rhythm to the days now. Mornings in Clara's sunlit kitchen, afternoons at the courthouse, and evenings buried in documents. With every passing day, I felt less like a broken girl clinging to survival and more like a woman sharpening her sword. I wasn't just clearing my name anymore. I was preparing for war. Julia Miller, focused and fearless, met with me daily. She and Detective Olivia Brooks worked like a synced machine. They walked me through every detail: court procedures, jury selection, witness preparation. It was overwhelming, but they made me feel like I wasn't alone in it. "They're going to try to paint you as unstable, emotional, attention-seeking," Julia warned me one afternoon. "They'll say you're fabricating everything out of spite. But we have facts. We have recordings. We have a trail. And I have the truth," I said softly. Then came another bombshell. Julia received a letter from Derek's attorney claiming that I had signed over my rights to the house a year ago during a family agreement. He attached a scanned copy of the supposed agreement. When I read it, I nearly laughed. It was that sloppy. "My signature's forged," I said immediately. "That's not even my handwriting." Olivia confirmed it within the hour. The signature didn't match any of the verified documents I'd submitted. It was another desperate attempt by Derek and Marcia to take what didn't belong to them. But now, everything they were trying only added fuel to the case. Julia filed charges of document forgery and attempted identity theft. I still stayed at Clara's, but I began picking up freelance interior redesign gigs to keep myself busy and sane. Clara's friends were kind and eager for help rearranging rooms, updating colors, or refreshing tired spaces. It didn't pay much at first, but it felt real.
Mine.
Earned. One evening, I stood alone in Clara's spare bedroom, now fully mine, looking at the vision board I'd tacked to the wall. It had house sketches, color palettes, photos of peaceful homes. And in the center, a photo of me and Dad, standing in front of our house years ago. My hand in his smile so proud. I touched the image, whispering, "I'm going to win this.
For you.
For us, the courtroom was colder than I imagined. Wood-paneled walls, rows of chairs, the quiet murmur of paperwork and footsteps echoing off stone. When I entered with Julia and Olivia by my side, all heads turned. I walked past Marcia and Derek, seated stiffly in the defense row. Derek's jaw was clenched. He looked pale. Marcia wore her usual pearls, but her face, once full of superiority, looked drawn, tight, afraid. The judge entered. All rise. This was it. The trial had officially begun. Julia stood and gave her opening argument, powerful, composed, and razor-sharp. This is not a misunderstanding. This is not a petty family feud. This is a case of deliberate fraud, physical abuse, and theft. The defendants manipulated documents, stole from an estate, assaulted their own kin, and conspired to strip her of her identity, dignity, and home. But she didn't back down. She fought, and the truth followed her voice. The room was silent. I kept my eyes straight ahead, my hands trembling slightly, but my spine straight. I wasn't here to beg. I was here to reclaim what was mine. The second day of the trial, the courtroom was packed. Witnesses were called. Julia Miller walked the jury through every piece of evidence like clockwork. The baby monitor recording was played first. Derek's voice, "We'll pin the ring on her. The house will be yours by Monday." Marcia's response, "She's always been a problem. Now we'll make her look like a thief." The jurors sat stunned. One woman visibly winced when my mother's voice echoed coldly across the room. Then came the bank records, detailing how Derek had siphoned over $38,000 from the estate, labeling the transfers as property maintenance. The court saw the forged signature on the fake agreement that claimed I'd signed away my inheritance. Handwriting experts confirmed it was not mine. Julia presented photos, financial logs, email printouts, and a timeline that left no doubt. This wasn't a misunderstanding. It was theft, manipulation, abuse. When they called my name, my heart pounded so loudly I could barely hear myself walk to the stand. I took a breath. The courtroom blurred for a second, until I looked at Clara, sitting in the back row, her hands folded over her purse. She gave me the smallest nod. I faced the jury. "My name is Nora. I'm 27 years old, and I was betrayed by the people I loved the most." My voice cracked once, then steadied. I spoke about my father, Thomas, how he built the house himself, how he left it to me, how proud he was to give me something of my own. I told them how Marcia and Derek twisted that legacy, how they manipulated documents, accused me of stealing, physically attacked me, and threw me out of my own home on my birthday. I described being handcuffed and humiliated, the sting of Derek's punch, the coldness of my mother's voice. And I finished with this. I didn't come here for revenge. I came here for the truth. Because even when they took my house, my name, and my peace, I held on to that. And today, I'm taking everything else back too. When I stepped down, the room was silent. Even Marcia looked shaken. The jury returned the same afternoon. The deliberation didn't last long. My hands were locked together in my lap. I stared at the floor as the foreperson stood. On the charges of fraud, conspiracy to commit theft, emotional abuse, assault, and document falsification, we find the defendants, Derek and Marcia, guilty on all counts. I exhaled, but I wasn't ready to cry.
Not yet.
The judge read the sentence. Derek was sentenced to 8 years in state prison for financial fraud, physical assault, and forgery. Marcia was sentenced to 10 years for orchestrating the scheme, public defamation, emotional abuse, and property fraud. Additionally, all assets taken from the estate were to be returned to me. The house, my house, was legally reinstated in my name. Every false document they submitted was declared void and criminal. Court-ordered restitution. Derek and Marcia would be responsible for repaying the misused estate funds. As Derek was handcuffed, his eyes stayed on the floor. No arrogance. No excuses. Just the weight of his own actions pressing down. Marcia didn't say a word. Her pearls looked heavier than usual. Her mask had finally cracked, and this time, she had no one left to blame. Julia leaned toward me and whispered, "They can't touch you anymore." And finally, I let myself feel it. Relief. Victory. A freedom. The house was quiet when I returned. Too quiet. The windows were sealed shut. The curtains drawn. The garden had overgrown. The place where I once felt safest had turned into a ghost of itself. But it was mine again. Illegally. Emotionally. Spiritually. I stood at the doorway for a long time, my hand resting on the knob, remembering all the versions of me that had once lived here. The little girl who painted on the walls with washable markers, the teenager who sat by the staircase crying after her father's funeral, the woman who had been dragged out of this very house in handcuffs. I opened the door. The scent of old dust and wood hit me like a wave. And then I got to work. Over the next several weeks, I stripped the house bare of its shadows. I painted the walls in soft earth tones, sage, cream, dove gray. I replaced the heavy drapes with linen curtains that fluttered with every breeze. I filled the kitchen with Clara's sun-dried herbs and my dad's old recipe books. I repurposed the study into a home design studio where I sketched layouts and drafted redesigns for clients. What started as therapy became a full-blown business. Clara introduced me to a few friends. Word spread. By fall, I had a waiting list. People wanted me to bring life back into their homes, and I did, not just with colors and furniture, but with the empathy of someone who knew what it was like to rebuild from nothing. And every time I saw a client smile, I felt it too. I was coming back. Detective Olivia Brooks still stopped by occasionally, sometimes for coffee, sometimes to drop off final court documents. She never stayed long, but every visit felt like a reminder that justice was real and that good people still existed. One morning, she placed a folder on my table and said, "This closes the case. You've officially won."
"Thanks to you," I said. She shook her head.
"Thanks to you. You never gave up." One afternoon, Clara came over with a basket of fresh lavender and rosemary. We sat on the porch, watching the sunset melt across the yard in honey and gold. "You did it," she said quietly. "You really did." I smiled, tears brimming at the edges of my eyes. "I think he would have been proud," I whispered.
She didn't need to ask who he was.
6 months after the trial, I hosted a small dinner party, the kind I had dreamed of for years. No drama, no insults, just soft music, good food, kind people. Clara was there. A few clients turned friends. And Detective Olivia, in jeans and a cardigan, laughing freely for the first time. We sat beneath paper lanterns and twinkling garden lights, sharing stories, passing dishes, and breathing in the peace. That night, after the guests had gone and the stars had scattered themselves across the sky, I sat on the back steps with a cup of tea. For the first time in what felt like forever, I wasn't angry. I wasn't scared. I wasn't broken. I looked up and whispered, "Dad, I kept it. I kept the house. I kept your name. And I'm finally free." Thank you for watching. If this story moved you, don't forget to like the video, share your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe to the channel for more powerful stories like this one. Your support means the world to us.